Hey guys, this is Chuck and welcome to Maverick's Arcade. Today we're going to be talking about how I built my arcade cabinet. Now, in a couple previous videos I've mentioned that prior to this I have not built anything since 6th grade. Well, it's kind of funny, I went to visit my dad's house and I noticed up on his shelf he still has the thing. So, without further ado, this is what I built in 6th grade. Now he has restained it since, and it looks like one of the the pegs are all there. But this was also under the supervision of the shop class teacher and all the right tools and so forth. So this is what I last built before this arcade. And then on the back side you can see he actually restained it and kept a couple of the dates on there. But anyway, that is what I built previous to this arcade. So if I can build that in 6th grade and build an arcade now, I guarantee you can as well. So first let's just to show again the render that I used. Now, originally when I was playing the arcade, as I said in my previous video, I used SketchUp to design the arcade first. Now, this gave me the benefit because then when I showed the skeleton view of it and I posted it on my YouTube, friends of mine said, hey, you might have a structural issue there. You might want to make an adjustment, here and there. And again, I apologize for not getting a video up sooner. This time of the year sucks for me with my allergies. So if I'm sniffling in here, please, I do apologize. So let's first show again what the final render was when I walked around the arcade here. So here is the render. And again, I originally planned on having a multimedia cabinet thing in the middle. And my Logitech speakers were going to poke out, and I was going to have a full bezel and everything with the monitor sitting behind it like a regular arcade. And I was trying to hide what the marquee was actually going to be. And as you zoom around, you can see I was going to put it on, make sure to put it on casters. And I was going to have a network jack sticking out of the back of the arcade, so I could make sure the machine was networked. But I ended up putting an adapter, wireless adapter inside. Of course, the hole for the subwoofer. And then we come back around to the front side. So again, and then as we go around the back, you can see I had exploded it so you could see what was happening. And the subwoofer's on the side and the PC's in the back. And then that middle part was supposed to be for the little shelf I was going to put inside. Now, I quickly abandoned the idea of the shelf, one, because it would have made the build a little more complicated, and two, because it would make it more like an entertainment center, because I was going to put consoles in there. But I realized I don't want an entertainment center, I want an arcade. So I scrapped that part. But otherwise, the rest of the changes kind of developed as I was building the machine and realizing some things that were kind of not correct with it. So we're going to go restart this and show you how the build actually proceeded. Again, apologize for the sniffles. Let's see here. Shut off that. So, in building the cabinet, first I started off with a bunch of pieces of wood and all the various parts all separated out. Now, the nice thing about using SketchUp also is I built everything to scale in SketchUp, so I was able to go back and refer to SketchUp and use their little ruler tool to measure each of the pieces so that I knew the cuts that I would need. And then, so then next, this is when I was doing a test board. And again, I recommend you do the same thing. That would allow you to see any potential conflicts before you actually build it onto the full arcade. So that was me. I found a layout of a button layout online. I printed them out, 2 of them, and then I tested how it would feel, pushing on the paper. So I cut all the holes out, using the bits mentioned in my control board video. Again, here's a good thing, is there's separate videos on the majority of all these topics. But again, you can see I had originally put that spinner behind the trackball, which is not good when you slide your hand up. You would smash your fingers into there. I also originally had planned to have volume buttons and to have the stop, pause, and play buttons up here. But that drastically changed, as you will see soon. So that's the bottom of me testing, and then I started adding wires and more wires and more wires and more wires. And a USB hub was originally attached directly to the bottom of the control panel. In the final design, this has changed. I also had started off with the U360 joysticks, which I have now switched to the servo sticks for that unique feel, which is also described in the servo stick video. This is me originally testing with LED blinky, see how all the functionality worked, and testing where I was going to mount the control board in my final version. And this is the picture from the LEDs that I used for the marquee when I was testing that functionality. And now we get to the point where we start actually cutting apart pieces of wood. Again, I used the measurements off of SketchUp, and I cut all of my pieces of wood for the frame and verified just by sticking them all next to each other that they were all flush and the same size. Start out, this is very simply the front part. So if you're looking at the arcade, this would be the little frame for the front piece. I then did the back piece, which obviously is taller because it has the back plane and goes all the way up to the back of the arcade. I then verified that they were even with each other, that all my measurements were correct. I was very proud of myself. It actually did work out. And then I just put my little, attached my corners, and I was using a little, you can see here up in the corner, I'm using little L brackets to make sure those pieces are attached to each other firmly. And they go up here and down here. And then when I attach this, they connect in here to here and here to here as well. So you can see I have little L brackets here, 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 and here. Now, at this point, actually it was a little after this point I realized I'd fucked up. I had forgot to calculate in my 3 inches automatically for the casters, so the control board was way up high. Luckily, because I did the L brackets the way I did, I was able to just cut these 2 front beams down shorter, and then the whole thing dropped freely because of those L's, those little L metal brackets. So I was able to then just screw them back in, tighten it all back down, and it was good to go with no further adjustment needed. So then I cut out the board. Now there's a little bit of an overhang on each side of the frame to account for the side panels, the front and the back panels. But I centered it up, made sure I had that little bit of edge on each side, and then I initially I screwed them in from the bottom, but then I also used these little L brackets around the corners to make sure that it was fastened tightly. This thing's a rock, it's not going anywhere. And again, that's just another view of the little L brackets. And then me from the bottom, I screwed these in, and then I screwed the wheels in, but this bottom plate is only a 3/4 inch board. So on top, I took a piece of low cube of 2x4, just stuck it down there so I had something extra strong to drill into, since this was going to be carrying some weight. And I was extremely proud because on my first attempt I was level, which I did not expect. I was expecting things to be a little crooked. So I was very proud when I took that measurement and was like, holy shit, it's level. And again, oh my god, it's level. So then I'm outside, and I've, let me see, yeah, you can see I've got drawings on here. This is the side shape. You can see here's where the marquee will be. Here's where the back plane is. This is all the way out to the front, and then this is down. Now, luckily, because my arcade is only 2 feet deep, I was able to take a full piece of plywood, cut it straight down the middle, and then use those 2 sides. So it allowed me to save a little bit of cost on wood, too. So again, you can see that's where I measured it out. Yeah, I'd labeled left side. So I took it outside, cut it with the circular saw, and on this part I had to do a plunge cut. So if you want to figure out how to do that, just look up plunge cut, and that will somebody's got a video out there how to do it. So then I just roughly measured to make sure that everything looked right, and it did. Now, because of the angles, it did kind of throw me off because this looks really weird shaped, but it is actually correct. I then measured out the pieces for my backboard for the sideboards and put those on. Again, this is all measurements that I already had from SketchUp. Just checking everything, make sure it's flush. And now this board in the back, there's actually a gap between the back plane about that big, and the control board actually slides underneath in the hole. So this little tab right here is part of the control panel board, and then I made holes cut up here so the cords can go down through. Now, and you can also see here's where those little blocks are for the wheels to attach to. And then this is me testing how the lighting would work. I had already ordered a vinyl printout of my graphics for the marquee, but I wanted to see how it will actually illuminate. So originally I thought I was going to use these little circle discs that are in there now, and that did not work and give me the brightness that I wanted. So then I used the LED light sticks from IKEA, which is in my other video, hacking IKEA light, deodor lights. So that's where I got that idea. And then it's me looking at the back side. And again, the back side I'm not so worried about because no one's ever going to see it, except for you. So this is the test of my marquee. I'm actually pretty proud of how it looked. And originally I had tried using electrical tape to mask out the edges and stuff, and it ended up not working well. So what I ended up doing in the end was I used just 2 pieces of plexiglass, and I very carefully cut through to make drill holes to go through. And then for the longest time this stayed rough, and I don't have the part in this video, but the red trim was just some corner edges that I cut and made a frame out of. That's not in this video, but yeah, that was pretty simple. So then this is me just testing, making sure everything looks good. And again, this is where I start doing my measurements for where I'm going to be cutting my control panel. So I did a center line, and then I figured out how much on each side of this would make it equal. Now you can see it looks like this is too far this way, but the end of this measurement is actually from here. So the measurement of each control is from this edge to this edge, and then this edge to this edge. So I take that measurement, I take the whole board measurement and I cut it in half. And then I take the measurement from here to here and I subtract that from this half, and then divide it by 2 so I know how much space I should have on either side of the buttons, how much blank space. And that allowed me to actually get the buttons perfectly centered for each position. And then I drew a center line to make sure that the buttons stay level with each other. But yeah, I'm going to use a lot of pencil. And this is where I learned construction in the winter is not a good idea. I'd never worked with plexiglass before this. I ended up going through 3 sheets. It's very expensive. I think it was like $80 a sheet, and I cracked 2 of them. So in my video when it's making your control panel and I show you how to cut the plexiglass, that was through a lot of lessons learned, and the bits and tools that I was using I mentioned in the other video. I would definitely recommend. Don't use a flange bit. That's and also make sure the plexiglass is warm before you cut it. And even some people take a hairdryer to warm it up extra to make sure that it's pliable. So the next step was I laid the whole arcade on its side, and this was to cut the subwoofer hole. So initially I just cut a hole, and then I used a little router and just went around and around and around and around and around until the hole was made. It fits the speaker. Now the whole speaker is pretty big, but the actual cone for the speaker is only this big, so that's the only part that I wanted to expose. So then I stood it up, and outside I tested mounting the TV to make sure I'd have enough room underneath, and then took it back inside. And let me see. Yeah, out here I also primered it. So you can see there's a bunch of white here, and actually no, it's not primer yet. I was desperate. It was cold and it was in the winter, so my wife got very upset because she could smell paint and primer upstairs. If your wife's gonna let you build an arcade, not argue with you, don't piss her off and leave paint smell throughout the house. Now, in hindsight, I probably should have just taken the marquee off, but I had actually just taped over the marquee and continued to paint. This would later prove wrong because some of the paint would bleed through and ruin the top sheet of plexiglass that I tried to seal my marquee in. So I ended up having to replace that plexiglass too. Me and plexiglass are not friends. But in the end, it ended up working out all right and looks good. So then I started spackling up the holes. Now, again, in this you're not going to see it, but I ended up replacing the control board, and here's why. At this point in the build, I've already attached my control panel, and I seal it up, and I try to smooth out the edges using the putty and painting over it and everything like that. Now the problem is I want to test out controls and test out different buttons and so forth, which makes removing that control panel extremely difficult. I ended up having to use a magnet to try to find where the screw holes were, and then dig out the paint and putty and all that other stuff to get to the screw head to be able to remove them. So my current control panel, it's a lot easier to remove, and I'll show you that when we show you the final product. So then again, winter sucks, lots of rain. I'm very desperate to get this done and work on it, and when I get an idea in my head, patience is not my friend. So I ended up taking some clear plastic, covering up my deck, took a tarp, hung it to the back fence, and I had myself a workshop outside. You can see it's pretty good coverage. Luckily, I had also just bought a couch, so I had a lot of cardboard boxes because that's one of 3 boxes. So I had a lot of cardboard to use. My daughter acting silly, but here we have everything puttied up, and we're getting ready to put, we were going to try to put a first coat of just black, I believe. Yep, there's Gabby. She's spray painting black. She was having fun. I thought my son would be really interested in this, but he said he would help me test games. My daughter is actually more to enjoy actually building things and spray painting things and stuff. So she's a little more of the artist. So we got it painted black. It was really blotchy. I did not like that. And then I came inside and went, shit, I can still see all the edges really well. So I ended up spackling the hell out of that and puttying it. And again, you can see I'm sealing in my control panel, where later I'll realize it's not easy to remove. But I got the edges all sealed up and flattened out. I brought my tarps in to make it a little more rainproof from wind. And then we primered it up, and you can see my daughter's very excited. Now the reason why we primered it is because I realized that spray paint was leaving too many streaks. I could see the grain of the wood extremely easy. Another note, paint, I know it says right on the can. I know this. But I'm impatient. So I went ahead and painted in the cold. 1, it doesn't dry well. 2, it doesn't look as good. But I realized, you know what? Fuck it. It can have imperfections. It's mine. I built it. Friends come over, they still say, holy shit, that's cool. You built this? Even though the paint looks kind of shitty. But that's fine. If you've got paint skills, God bless you. So we got this painted, primered up. Got it all painted white. It looks like the kit when he got destroyed and they had to rebuild kit. Nice white, plain white. Yep, that's white again. So I bring it inside. I notice, because of the cold, the primer's starting to fall in places. Now this part I don't really care about because I know the TV's going to be covering it up. But also in my video, you remember in my original video, I had planned on using the Logitech speakers to poke through the holes. Well, there's another video I have called Hacking Logitech Speakers, and it was that video was started because I thought, hey, wait a minute, maybe I could actually mount the speakers in behind the TV. That would look awesome. So these little holes on the back plane is where the speakers actually are mounted behind. So they push the sound right behind the TV, but you don't have to see the speakers. And then the holes right here are where the volume knob, the headphone jack, and the power button is for the speakers. You can see also this is where I decided to take some old stools that we were going to throw out and repaint them for the arcade. They do not look good painted, but the fact that they match the arcade makes it kind of cool. This is one great thing about putting the arcade on casters is I could roll it straight in the house, straight outside, straight inside, straight outside. So it was great. So I ended up painting, taking regular paint this time instead of black paint. I just brushed on black paint on parts of the chairs and the whole arcade. And then I printed out with a font that I wanted to use. I think it was like a Transformers font. And then cut out with an X-Acto knife against the arcade. So I taped the thing to the arcade, and then I cut it with the X-Acto knife to make a stencil. And then I spray painted that. Now again, in the cold, what happened was the paint laid like it was more like a vinyl sticker. So originally wasn't that strong of a grip. But you can see I made holes for the what will eventually be the pinball, the plunger, insert coins, and then the power button in the back. Then I decided to make a big old MA logo on either side of the arcade. So I stenciled that out as well. Now this is gone. This was for a red line to go around. This is gone now because I had to replace the control panel. And what I ended up using, which actually looks better, was red duct tape around the edges. And it actually turned out cleaner looking. I was very surprised. But again, me just painting, various paint. And then I cut the holes out. Note, I should have painted after I cut the holes. But anyway, so I got all my holes cut out. And then, let's see. Yeah, well, no, those holes are cut first, okay? Just the control panel doesn't look to be cut out first. But yeah, I cut all the holes first. That's a good idea. So then I started wiring in the speaker. You can see I used a little L bracket and very short screws into the Logitech speaker because I didn't want to puncture the actual inside of the speaker. So it's mounted up to the side hole, and it mounts nice and flush. This is still the controller from the deodor lights for me testing. And then I mounted an electrical box in here. Now, one thing I am going to do is I'm going to put an actual hard switch on the side of the machine to shut it all the way off and all the way on. And the reason why is I've noticed I have 3 USB powered hubs in the arcade, and I noticed if it stays plugged in or it continues to have power, then the devices, when I power on the machine, don't initialize because they've had power too long. The only way to get everything to work again is to fully unplug the arcade and plug it back in. So I figure if I put a hard rocker switch on the side of the arcade, one, it'd be a little more like a classic arcade, and 2, it would make sure everything has no power until I'm ready to use it. So it fixes that USB disconnection problem. So this is the front of the arcade before the controls went in. And again, this is still running off the deodor controller from IKEA. But I decided to use bike hooks to mount the PlayStation controllers and to use little pegs to mount the guns. Just a bunch of parts that I was using. And again, this is me taking all the controls out of my test board and putting them into my arcade. So just a couple of those. And now this is the arcade with all the buttons mounted. Originally I had a webcam up here and I switched out just for a microphone. Now you may wonder why you need a microphone. Well, for games like the Wii game systems, excuse me, they have some audio games where you speak. And I know... what is it? Super Smash? No, not Super Smash Brothers. Some Mario game my daughter likes, and that requires you to speak in some parts. But anyway, so again, side by side from the old board into the new board. And that's it for that slideshow. So, you can see the steps I went to do it. Now what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a walk around of what I started with in my head and how everything actually came out. So we're going to bring this back up, and we're going to put it over here in this corner, like so. I want to move over here just a little bit. So, as you can see, a little bit different. I've also, since previous videos, added a Nintendo controller, so it does SNES and NES games to give you that real tactile feel. The screen is on the outside, not the inside as displayed over here. And the reason why is I realized if the screen goes bad, I'd have to find the exact same dimensions or same model screen to replace it with, and that's not likely. So if I have to replace the screen, since it's forward mounted, all I have to do is just unmount it, pop it back on there. A lot easier to do that way. So let's step around this a little bit more. So I got the front view here, and then so that's the front view on the arcade. Now the things that are different about it, as I was building, I decided, shit, I want to get virtual pinball set up eventually. So I made the holes for the plunger and the pinball. And then again, I decided not to do the shelf inside because it's not an entertainment center, it's an arcade. So that's why the controllers are hanging off the side, as I originally had planned on having them inside that cabinet. But I decided to scrap the cabinet idea. Now, in the original drawing, the player start buttons were going to be up on the back plane. However, I realized the control panel was pretty empty with the amount of space that I gave it, so I could put those buttons down without a problem. And then I moved those. You could see the red, the blue, and the yellow buttons up here are those stop, pause, play buttons. Well, the play button ended up getting moved down to the first player controls, so I only needed a stop and a pause button. And I went ahead and put those up on there. Now, also, because I deviated from this plan and I put speaker controls and a headphone jack, which I love because my son can play the arcade while I'm working, and I don't have to hear it. But because I put the volume controls right here conveniently, my original plan to have volume controls up here was no longer necessary. So I scrapped that. Everything else, the one thing this did not have a plan to have a plexiglass on top, but again, I love that look of when the LEDs are lighting up the plexiglass and the edges of the plexiglass light up and everything. So definitely that's an added feature that was not originally I thought about, and I love the way it ended up coming out. It also allowed me to do some more artwork on the control panel that I hadn't originally planned. So we hit play, step through here a little bit. We're going to close up on the controls. Now, that is right here. So as you can see, underneath the plexiglass, I have labels for each of these buttons have a label for when you're in the GUI of the arcade system. So it has select, play, flip box, things like that written on the control panel. Excuse me. It's also got various characters that my kids helped pick out. It's got an X-Wing, it's got Donkey Kong, Luigi, Leisure Suit Larry, which I have not explained to my kids, Princess Peach, and there's a couple other ones around here. But the thing that's nice also, I got the arrows for the trackball. And in my marquee video that I have, you'll see for games like Golden Tee, it's great because I can take those same arrow symbols and replicate what Golden Tee had as far as telling you how to hook the ball and things like that. So that's the control panel changes. Now you can see over here, these holes in the plexi are actually so I can hit the screw holes that are in the wood for the control panel. So once I unscrew those, the whole panel can lift right up and I can make changes to the panel, drop it back down, and screw in those holes in the plexi without risking cracking the plexi. Do not want to crack any more plexiglass. So then we hit play here. You can see also the speakers are obviously different, which I love. It looks way better. And then again, this is me trying to be silly with the marquee and not show any of my friends the marquee I was planning, which of course is Maverick's Arcade. Now, one thing that was fun about designing this marquee too is in the marquee, I have hidden my wife's initials, my initials, and my son and my daughter's names. So they like when their friends come over to see if their friends can find where their names are hidden. So then we scroll around the back side. So here's the side, and then I was showing them the wheels. So you can see I also ended up, as I was building this, I drilled holes right through the bottom, and I put some LEDs on the bottom. So now the arcade's got ground effects underneath. Again, something I was doing as I went, and I thought, holy crap, I love this idea. Now also originally I was going to have the power cord come out the back of the arcade, but I ended up doing it out the left side of the arcade so that when the back panel comes off I don't have to worry about the cord. Since that left panel is fixed and does not usually come off for any reason, I figured it'd be better to have the power cord come out of there. So that's one minor change there. And then as we move to the back side, you can see it's pretty straight forward. Now originally I had planned on using pegboard, and the thought was to add ventilation for the system. But with moving the monitor outside of the actual enclosure, not nearly as much power is being, or heat is being generated as was previously planned. Also, I originally had planned to use a dryer hose. Let me scroll around to the back more here. This hole here, I originally had planned on using a dryer hose coming straight out of the PC's fan to vent some of the heat. What I ended up doing instead is I have two fans on the back, one here, 10mm fan, and a 120mm fan, and a 120mm fan down here. Now the one up on top sucks air out of the cabinet. This bottom fan pushes air into the cabinet, so I got a nice circular motion to keep that air flowing and circulating in and out of the cabinet. And again, we did away with the network jack because it's got Wi-Fi. So now we're just scrolling back around the arcade. Here's the flush back part of it. Then we go back around. You can see where the speaker is, and the joysticks are velcroed to the side of the case. And then we come back around, and you can see this is now showing how things inside would look. So you can see, just like in the video, I got my case mounts right there. I got my electrical box over here, and then I've got my speaker mounted to the side over here. The one thing I also hadn't planned is when I removed my control panel, as you can see in my control panel video, I ended up using RJ45 connections so I can easily disconnect the entire control panel, undo the RJ45 connections here and here, and remove the whole board. So it makes it a lot more portable. Let me see, I think that was all of this video that's pertinent. Yeah. And then it shows underneath the control deck, but you've already seen that. So we don't need the walk around, and we don't need the left display. So again, this is how I built my cabinet. Everyone's build will be different. If you're using plans from the internet, the build will be obviously a lot different. But I know some people had some questions on how I built mine, and I want to make sure to make a video to show you guys how I did it. So if you guys have any questions, please leave a comment. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, and please tell other friends that are kind of into this stuff to check me out. If you guys have any other questions, again, let me know, or email Maverick at mavericksarcade@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And that's it. Again, thanks for watching. Hey guys, thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click like below. If you have any questions or comments, you may comment below or email mavericksarcade@gmail.com. Also, we are now streaming on Twitch, and this is our URL, so it's www.twitch.tv/mavericksarcade. Please check us out. We'll be playing some old classic PS1, PS2 games and other games that I just generally didn't play much, so I'm going to need your help. If these are games that you know, please jump online. Make sure to tell me, and the way you can do that is either through the chat on Twitch, or we are now using Discord. So look on our main page. There's a URL for the Discord to join for that, and then you'll be able to join us in our live streams or when we're streaming on YouTube. That will allow us to share the chat on the screen and for you to communicate via voice over our show while we're recording. So please check it out. Looking forward to seeing you guys and actually getting to speak to you guys while we're doing our streams. Again, please consider subscribing, and thank you again for watching.